Welcome to our Instagram Live today. I'm Brittany, and we have John, my fiance, coming on to chat with us about navigating menstrual cycle imbalances in a partnership. So before we dive into this topic, which I think I'm really excited to talk about because there's a lot that's happened behind the scenes with us in our own conversation, as kind of this three-part journey where when we first met, I was going through a lot of menstrual imbalances that we had a lot of conversations about and had to work through both kind of individually and together. And then going through like the healing journey of that, and now to now not experiencing symptoms. And so over the past 3 years, like how it has felt in our relationship going through all of that, and then also um, like how our communication has changed through that, and how we navigated it together. So if you have questions, please drop them in the chat. I'll be watching the chat as I'm asking John questions, and I'll try to answer your questions. Um, if we don't get to your questions today, feel free to comment afterwards, once this is posted. But really the point of this is to like share what our experience was and what we've learned, because I know I've already heard from either current clients or other conversations that other people have experienced similar challenges. And we want this to be a fun but also informative conversation to um, share that maybe our experience could also help somebody else. So, um, you ready?
Yes.
Okay. So John, welcome. Can you share, give us an introduction about who you are? Because you've actually never been on my Instagram before.
Never been, at least not on Instagram Live. Like I've been, oh, thanks. I've been on, you've like shared about me, I think, on your Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess I've never been on your Instagram.
Yeah, well, welcome.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Yes, my name is John. I am currently a student of business, studying business at the Tufts School of Business at Dartmouth. I just finished a summer internship. A couple weeks off before the second year starts. And I like climbing year round and woodworking, and I'll do other sports, aerobic sports, when Brittany is really excited about them. Otherwise, I try not to. We've been going mountain biking though a little bit, though. We go on cruiser rides, and for me, they're not cruiser. So, so I guess it's relative. But
Yeah, he likes to nap on our mountain bike
yeah, I
rides.
could have fallen asleep on our bike ride yesterday.
Yeah.
That's what I was planning on doing, but then it wasn't. There are a lot of hills. There are a lot of heartbreak hills on the cruiser bike ride.
Well, we'll have to have another Instagram
Oh,
live to
right.
like
Sorry.
hear
Yeah.
about your
My cruiser bike ride.
athletic endeavors and napping.
What else? Yeah, like woodworking. Eat a lot of cereal. Um, we have a dog that I love a lot. Before business school, I was an independent consultant, and then I worked for organizations like the Appalachian Mountain Club and the Outward Bound School Out West, and other smaller outfits similar to Outward Bound, in New Hampshire and also in Colorado. And I think that, I don't know, how's that sound for intro? It's kind of like mishmashed all over the place. I'm used to giving like a 2 or 3 minute spiel of intros from recruiting for internships and then full-time work after my MBA program. So I have like a professional one, but that's kind of like a mishmash, I'd say, intro.
You're really going for like the long intro on this
Was
live
that just
podcast.
rambling?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Okay.
Well, very excited to have you here, so thank you.
Thanks.
Um, so do you know your Ayurveda constitution?
I do.
Okay, a couple fun questions before we get into the good stuff. What is it?
I'm a Pitta Kapha.
Do you know what that means?
It means I'm fiery, but also grounded and therefore wise.
Yeah, That's a good explanation.
Yeah, I think the fiery driven part, but also I can sometimes just like be still and eat food and not be like so crazy and driven and fiery.
Yeah,
Hence the coffee part. I don't know how that sounds.
yeah, your pitta is like very motivated, very driven, um, very passionate, and very focused, and your kapha side is very compassionate, very loving, very gentle, and very soft.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's very nice.
Yeah. Um, all right, what's your favorite Ayurvedic practice and why?
Eating ice cream, I think. No, but no, I've been told
You
that
do
that's
like ice cream.
sometimes Ayurvedic. It depends upon when.
It always
It
depends.
always depends. I think probably Naso using Naso oil. I think that's probably my favorite because I used to get a lot of congestion, particularly in the wintertime, when sleeping, and then I also get sinus infections off of that. And so that using that before bedtime like clears my sinuses, and I don't get as many sinus infections in the winter, and I wake up with a more clear nasal system.
Yeah, it's true. You didn't snore as much when you were using the nasi oil. Yeah. So, anyways, okay. Well, great. So good job on your Ayurvedic practices.
Thanks.
Um, all right. So getting into more of the topic for today, which is talking about the menstrual cycle and our experience through that. So, what do you currently know about the female menstrual cycle?
Um,
Or a few things that you know about
sure.
it.
Yeah, for the four phases.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know about those.
Uh-huh.
Um, I know. I think. Well, maybe this gets into like what I've learned
Hmm.
about since our time together, but just how widely it can vary from person to person.
Hmm.
I feel like what I know most about right now, and just how yeah how seamless, I guess, kind of in that vein, how seamless it can be for some individuals, but also how it can really incapacitate some others for a day or more without a doubt. So I think that's probably the majority of what I
Hmm. Hmm. Okay.
I don't know. How's that
Is
for?
that more than you knew before we started dating?
Yeah, well, and I guess yes, I would say so. Um, I felt like my knowledge before that was very like eighth grade, like health sciences,
Mm.
pretty baseline.
Mhm.
Um, but before we started dating, yeah, I hadn't really dated anyone that I had been involved with their menstrual cycle very much at all.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
and so I felt like, yeah, I didn't really have a perception of that at all, I guess.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then when we met, I was experiencing like my menstrual imbalances were getting more severe when we first started dating, and there was no way I couldn't not talk about that. Um, because it was for me, it was starting to impact like quality of life
Hmm.
and our experiences and even making plans together.
Yeah.
So I feel like right away I became very vocal about what I was experiencing
Hmm.
right from the get-go.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Like it was to the point where like you go through a cycle like almost once every 3 weeks or maybe 3.5 weeks at most.
Hmm.
And of that, then like 2 or 3 days you were either like fully laid up for or entering or exiting
Hmm.
the height of that
Hmm.
of menstruating.
Yeah,
So
so it like it really was intrusive to our lifestyle, and not just our lifestyle, but what we were like how I was spending my time, which then
mhm.
impacted like our time together too.
Definitely, yeah. And at that point in our relationship, I had a much more flexible like work schedule than I do now. And I think I'm guessing you probably asked me like, "Do you want to be involved with this or not?" And I was, of course, I was like, "Yeah." And so I was able to like flex and be a part of it. Um,
You mean about what I was experiencing?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm. Which then, yeah, which I would then you'd be like, oh, I think it's going to happen this period of time, and it'd be on me to like not have plans essentially for that period of time or be ready to flex whenever I thought it might happen. So yeah, it definitely impacted our time together, my time, and your
Yeah, it was hard to plan around when it was gonna start.
time.
And not just start, but then when it did start, it was I was like, couldn't really get up from bed or the
Yeah.
couch um, for at least a day.
Yeah. Mhm.
And that was severely impacting because then if you weren't here, I felt very kind of scared of
Mhm.
being in that much pain alone and
Yeah.
not knowing what was going on.
Mhm.
Um, so, how would you say, um, like, what's our experience now? Maybe we'll
Um,
start there and then back forth.
yeah, it's a good question. I feel well, I guess maybe the to me the well, I mean, I guess maybe it's quite different in the fact that you have much more of a pulse on kind of your cycle and what you're experiencing and how it's going to lay out, I think, is one thing. And also like your symptom, like just what you're experiencing is
Mhm,
a lot less than what it was. I think also too, since then you've had a lot of learnings about like what works for you. Like
mhm,
you knew a lot of things back then, like hot water bottles and rest. Um, you didn't know about. I don't remember when you started taking Crampar. I
mm,
felt like that was like relatively recent. And
mhm,
also, it was interesting was back then you weren't like that excited to take ibuprofen because you knew that would mask your symptoms and you wanted to like learn and figure out what was like going to work and what wasn't. And like that was that was yeah, just like that was hard to watch as a compassionate individual who knew that that would be like a at least the short term fix. But you were definitely right, and that wasn't the move because you eventually figured out other things that were triggering your symptoms and how to alleviate them and remove them. But that I guess I share all that because now that you've gone through that process, particularly, sometimes it does get a little bit bad right now and you're more willing to take ibuprofen, recognizing that you're like, okay, well, it's like this is I've done everything I know how to do. I'm not like in that phase of experimenting and learning. I just need to get through this. And so you are more willing to do that. But definitely still pretty rarely, I would say, considering I think the pain you go through.
well, yeah, I didn't have pain for 10 months
Yeah.
once I really started to address the symptoms and like understand what was happening. So didn't have I didn't have any pain. And even just to give everyone else context of like the symptoms, it was like brain fog for at least a week before. Like I remember our conversations were like there was no communication. Like we could not communicate to each other. I
Mhm.
had this like shield in front of my brain where it just like wouldn't work. So any conversation we had during that time was just unproductive. Um, and kind of led us to like argue a lot more
Mhm.
because of it, because I just couldn't, my brain was like very foggy. Um, and that was for at least a week prior to bleeding
Mhm.
consistently. Um, and then also like the pain that we talked about, and also like bloating and swelling and sensitivity, um,
Mhm.
like intense food cravings were another thing that were really significant. So anyway, so those were some of the things that I was experiencing. Oh, and fatigue too. I
Yeah.
was like I would go from like 150 miles an hour to just like flat out, with like no real explanation in between. So it was like these like real high highs and real low lows, and there was no stable energy ever.
Mhm.
And it was almost like the first 2 weeks after bleeding felt like great. And then the second 2 weeks was like really stressful, really anxiety inducing, like really nervous about when I was going to be in pain again. And so I feel like that was kind of the cycle was like 2 weeks felt awesome and was nonstop energy. And then 2 weeks was pretty much like on the couch, and feeling really awful. So I think that, and now, um, the symptoms, like
Yeah.
none of that is happening.
Yeah, I forgot about most of those. And then you
You're
mentioned
right.
them, and it's like, oh yeah, it's painful, and you want to take ibuprofen, which is wild considering everything that's going on. But yeah, it's much less now, I would say, significantly, like nil practically compared to all that. To the point where before I also had a more flexible schedule back then. But before, like I would center like my time around when we thought you'd be bleeding and then when you would be. And now I don't have that flexibility. It's just kind of like whatever, and you don't really need me as much. Like it's more just kind of, I feel like more baseline, pretty basic emotional support than anything that I was doing before.
Yeah, and not even that. Like I feel like pretty comfortable,
Mhm.
um, like even when you're not around.
Yeah, maybe that's more me who wants to be for emotional support than actually. Maybe that's me projecting. Yeah, it's like, oh, she's calling me and telling me she's about to be in her period, and I want to be there, but I'm not. So
Yeah.
maybe probably just
Well, so and the point of that with like not wanting to explain, like not wanting to take ibuprofen means that for me, it felt like, well, I was just taking ibuprofen, but I wasn't actually understanding what was going on. And I remember multiple times having conversations with you as I was like laying in the bathtub trying to have relief from being in pain. And you're like, you like, we need to do something else. And I was like, well, I don't know what to do. And there was a lot of confusion around like, well, what do we do
mm-hmm.
next? Because we don't understand what's happening. Do you remember those conversations?
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, but I don't remember the answers. Like I don't like. I feel like you did the
So
work. I don't like. I didn't do any of the figuring out or experimenting. Like you figured that out.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, it was like, um, there has to be a reason this is happening. Like the answer can't just be go on birth control or get surgery.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I was like very determined in figuring out what was going on.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I really started to understand it through Ayurveda and actually using the practices and like, I mean, I've been studying Ayurveda for a while, and then I was able to, I think, just see it from this bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
That added a lot of um, depth to what I was experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
Like things just kind of clicked at a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like little bits over time. Where it's like, oh, that month was a little less painful, or that month I didn't have hot flashes at night, or that month I didn't like sweat through the sheets
Mm-hmm.
before I got my period. So okay, so we're doing something right. So it was like kind of peeling back these little pieces along the way that eventually started to feel really hopeful for like, oh, we're gonna have answers
Mm-hmm.
to whatever it is going on.
Yeah. And your cycles are getting longer too, as
That's
compared
right.
to like the 3.5 weeks. They're now like 4 or longer.
Yeah. Yeah, they were getting really short. They were going to like 23 days
Mm-hmm.
um consistently. And now they're back up to like 26, 28
Yeah.
on average.
Mm-hmm.
Um so for people that are listening, like what would you say, like being someone that's kind of seen this like okay, really severe to kind of variable, going through this process of like trying to figure it out to now not having symptoms and feeling really healthy. Like what advice would you give someone that's maybe in your position and like doesn't know how to help their partner?
Mm-hmm. Um,
And it doesn't have to be just like menstrual imbalances, like maybe it's some other thing you're trying to figure out.
sure. Yeah. I think probably firstly the recognition that it's a roller coaster, like it's not a linear path. It goes up and down, and eventually it starts to trend in one direction or the other. But it's never like a cure all. Oh, right, thank you. It's never like a cure all. There isn't just one thing that's going to fix it, and also probably that aspect of trust as well, where it's like, yeah, it was maddening when you wouldn't want to take ibuprofen because to me that was the thing to that would help alleviate the pain that I was watching you in. But clearly, like I had some aspect, I didn't force it down your throat. I had some aspect of trust in the process and in you, and it working out, and finding your own way, and like the results and the symptoms, um, really really improving without a doubt over the last number of years. Um, I think also sometimes communication is hard. I feel like we've gotten better at that, but um, I think I remember I felt for a while I had like things to say written down somewhere. I don't know if I ever told you about that, but just like reminders of like how to phrase
Oh.
things, um, like when you were sharing something, either like just around when you're bleeding or about bleeding. And one thing that I had to keep in my mind was wondering if you wanted just to be heard or if you wanted
Mm,
solutions, I think was like one kind of not rule. It wasn't a rule, but it's just like something to follow, like a piece of communication advice that we'd kind of like whittled away through the arguments that we had had in previous cycles and trying to figure all this out. So keeping track of those and also like trying to find them the best you can, I think. Helps with the communication. And also like I like keep them in the back of my mind, but I don't like it doesn't really impact me anymore because of where we are, I think, in the process, if that makes sense.
so you're able to like in the moment take a step back and be like, oh wait, is she asking for help or is she asking for support or is she just asking or is she just looking for someone to share
Yeah, and
what's
voice and
happening?
yeah, exactly. And just yeah, give voice and share that makes sense for because I think you would go through something and share about it, and then I would pepper you with possible solutions to the point where it'd be infuriating and overwhelming, and then it was infuriating and overwhelming, and so that didn't go well. And so I think that learning, and that's just the one example that comes to mind for communication. I'm sure there are others, but
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm. No, I think that's helpful and probably would resonate with a lot of people too. Because I think I didn't even realize that's what I needed too. So it was helpful for you to even have that recognition and like bring it to both of us.
Mhm,
Like, oh, this is maybe this is a more holistic way of approaching this conversation.
mhm. Yeah, no, I think that makes sense.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think those are my main ones.
Okay, well, that's helpful. Thank you.
Hopefully that's
uh,
all.
yeah, yeah. Is there anything else that like stands out to you about, I don't know, our experience that you think might be helpful for other people that are,
No, well, maybe only in that like this is probably true of many things in a relationship, but us going through that, I'm sure that when we start a family, well, I hear the hormones can be crazy then, and like who knows what it'll be like. But like those foundational aspects of communication, I'm hoping will, and us just like
mm,
talking about your body and what it's going through will help lay the foundation for that next phase and that next phase and phases with me that I'm sure will happen or do happen. And so looking at that long-term perspective rather than just um, a singular thing, at least it does seem to transfer and carry over like the communication skills. So
mhm,
nice.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. So it's like having the foundational pieces to not just apply to this situation, but whatever ends up happening down the road.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like it's almost different for us from when we talk about finances to when we talk about health. Like they're
Mm,
different, almost communication skills in some regards. And so I feel like we've got the health ones pretty dialed.
mm. So we need to work on financial conversation communications.
Maybe I don't
Okay.
know. Yeah. Well, I
We'll
think
cover that
I think
next.
that's hard. Like I think as we get married and figure out merge finances more, I'm sure that's like the next step for
Yeah,
us. But
that's first for us. So we'll
yeah,
figure it out.
yeah.
um, well, I do think like to that point, I do want to clarify for anyone that's going through like I never felt like you were trying to like tell me what to do with my body or like just chalking it up to hormones.
Yeah.
Right? Like that, I think that's a really significant piece because I do still hear that sometimes. And I think there's this shift in conversation of, well, we can't just use hormones as an excuse
Mhm.
because what I was experiencing was an imbalance of hormones. So, like, when the hormones are imbalanced, I'm not experiencing brain fog and I'm not experiencing poor communication. I'm not experiencing those like symptoms that come along, like the PMS and having like severe mood swings. That is a sign that there is something else going on that needs to be addressed. So, using like, oh, well, it's just your hormones, or well, she's just PMSing, like those are not those are not appropriate comments because it's not a holistic view of actually what's happening for someone's experience.
Mhm.
It's like that might be what is going on in the moment. Like there might be a mood swing happening, or there might be emotions being expressed, but it's um taking that step back and like pausing before reacting to that and saying like, okay, what is what let's look at this from a holistic perspective and not just like using it as an excuse to let things happen.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. So if you're someone that's experiencing that, or if your partner is experiencing that, um look for more resources. Like if you're not getting answers, for me, I wasn't getting answers from my doctor to explain these symptoms I was having. It was just like, oh, well, your hormones are changing. You're in your 30s. That's not an acceptable answer. Um, because there's reasons that those things are happening and it's worth finding out so that you can live a life that's not impacted by your menstrual cycle. Like you doesn't have to be impacted by it. Doesn't like our plans aren't impacted by it anymore. Um,
Mhm.
so hopefully that is helpful and like a takeaway for people that either are going through this right now or maybe know someone going through it, or is just wanting to help us change this language that's out there about what it means to have a healthy menstrual cycle. Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, great. Well, if anyone has any questions, you can reach out to us. If you want to learn more, you can also go onto my website, and there's an ebook um, where you can learn a free ebook where you can learn all about what a healthy menstrual cycle is and what an imbalanced menstrual cycle may look like. So check that out. If you have questions, maybe share it with your partner, and you can bring it up as something to both learn together. And then, John, um, where can people want to hang out with you? How do they find you?
I don't know. Um, if people want to hang out with me, I did finish a executive and career coaching program last year and did not then practice through my internship. And when I finish my MBA program, I will not be starting my own coaching practice right away. But over the next year, I will be moving towards the international certification for coaching by accruing hours in the field. And so, if folks are interested in some career life coaching, they can reach out to me. My website is currently down and being revamped, and also had to be taken down because of my internship and subsequent work. But will be up in the next week or two.
Yeah, so if you're interested in working with John as a life coach, um, perhaps you resonated with some of his tools that he was sharing today, you can send me a message and I'll get you in touch with him.
Great.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I guess that wraps up our conversation today. Thank you for joining. Thank you for sharing your favorite Ayurvedic practice.